everybody. Welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldai, your host. And isn't it insane that it's already November and we are kicking off this new month, which we are calling Innovators Month, with our sponsors of the month, Iris Automation. And who better than to be a part of this than CEO John Damush. John, it's so great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Dawn. Great to be back.
I think you might have seen, our legacy podcast, which was Drones at Dawn. You were on that back, I'm going to say, in March, and posted that up on social, and it's kind of Throwback Thursday last week. Such a fun interview, and boy, so much has happened with Iris since March. It's really hard to keep up, and this is a great opportunity to catch up on all the, as we really almost come to the end of the year, to reflect back on everything that you all have accomplished, especially in the innovation space and with beyond visual line of sight. So great to have you back on.
Thanks. It has been a great ride, and March was like so Q1. It's things go really fast in our space, which is great. It's electric.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of electric, I mean, you guys have been really racking up the awards in the last couple of years, including some recent recognition. Do you want to talk a little bit about that up front?
Yeah, I mean, those things are wonderful, right? Anytime your peer group and people in the community recognize you for things that you don't really advertise, it feels good. And, we've been very active in the Nevada region. It's where we do all of our flight testing. We've got a good kernel of a base of operations there that's kind of a shared space with the University of Nevada, Reno, and we have a tight relationship with the city of Reno. Well, there was an award given to us as, one of the best, workplaces in Reno. And that's one of those ones that feels really, really good, right? It's not about like achieving a revenue target or a profit target or anything like that. It's about providing people a great place to work. And that's very high on my priority list, because none of this stuff happens without the right people doing great things. So that's been a really nice kind of icing on top.
Well, yeah, look, John, the reality is that it is all about relationships, and in the Air Force, we always used to say, the Air Force folks always used to say, mission first, people always. And I, after being in the Air Force for almost 25 years, I say, y'all got this backwards. It's people first, mission always. And to get that kind of recognition for, about your workforce, I think speaks volumes, frankly, about your leadership. And
well, thank you. Appreciate that.
It really does. And, I love also what you're doing in conjunction with Women in Drones. So for everybody out there, just if you didn't know, Iris Automation not only is a Women in Drones member, of course, but is sponsoring the Women to Watch Global Awards Entrepreneurship Individual Award this year. And, those awards, I can to say from personal experience, are life-changing, because I received the Leadership Award in 2019, which inspired me to create my company, which is why I'm an ambassador for that award now. So thank you so much for your support of Women in Drones and everything they are trying to do with regards to workforce development and creating that diverse workforce of tomorrow.
Our pleasure, really. I think the word you just used there, diversity, it's gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of years, but I'll drill a level deeper and say that you need not just diversity in terms of gender and race, but you need diversity of thought to truly innovate. It's really easy to get locked in on a specific solution and a line of thinking, and you need orthogonal points of view. So, things like Women in Drones, I have two daughters. My daughter just came in third, so close, in a catapult contest for her second grade kind of science project. And she made this little catapult out of tongue depressors, but she would have won for distance over size of catapult. It is definitely the most power packed thing. People that took first and second had really big, giant, like trebuchets and things like that. So, she won. But that's really important, because I wouldn't have thought to do what she did, and ended up with a really novel and kind of successful approach to the problem. So happy to do it. I love that we're in this place in time.
Well, and spoken like a true proud dad, but also with an innovator mindset, right? I mean, you're focusing on, the innovative way that she did even in second grade. And yeah, so again, thanks for that. And let's talk about the innovation. So you know, your keystone product, I'll call it Cassia, you know, has
Hmm.
come a long way really from when I started first writing about it. I really stumbled upon Cassia when I was writing for Inside, which I still do, Inside Unmanned Systems magazine. I remember researching something and finding your product, which is that detect and avoid kind of visual learning based product, and just wrote about it, put it in the magazine, and that's when I started connecting with you, your team. And I've been following you along the way, and you know, you went from Cassia to, and I know you can say this better, Cassia 360, Cassia X, and I think there's a new one even that just came out. So why don't you kind of walk through, you know, kind of the progression of Cassia, especially, you know, the history of it, but then like this year, what has developed?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, the brief history is it's an optical based target detection system. Is probably the best generic way to encapsulate what Cassia is. It uses a combination of, you know, off-the-shelf cameras. We don't do anything really exotic with the cameras. We purchase them from other B2B vendors. It runs through a central compute module, which again is off-the-shelf components. We assemble it into the form factor that we need and make sure that we can do all of the camera data movement that we need to support the operation itself. But fundamentally, you know, the hardware is the platform for the software to run on. And the software is a combination of computer vision and machine learning that, you know, kind of mimics the way you and I look at a scene and determine what's there. You know, we're amazing pattern recognition engines. Our eye-brain combination is the result of millions of years of evolution. So first of all, we're a long way from replicating a human, by the way. So if everybody's really worried about autonomy and Cyber9 Systems T101, don't worry, we got a ways to go. Yeah, it won't be in our lifetimes. But from a computer vision perspective, we're actually getting to a point where we can kind of exceed the human's capability to see things. So that's kind of the basic, in a nutshell, what Cassia is. Now, what's happened this year is really interesting. That the capabilities that we started 2021 with are the result of about 6 years of heads down development, a lot of flying, a lot of data labeling, a lot of simulation to get to a point where the system was robust, reliable, and, you know, high enough performance to actually be able to deliver some value to people. We had some prototype systems before this year, and, you know, we were in the FAA's integration pilot program and had some successful trials with some, you know, approvals from the FAA. That was huge win. But that's step one, right?
Yeah.
And since then, it's been, okay, let's take the next few steps. And now we're really focused on where do we apply this technology to deliver the biggest value and solve the problem, right? It's I know that their theme is innovation, but innovation isn't there just to serve itself. You're driving towards some outcome, right? And that outcome has to deliver value to someone. The value we're trying to deliver is the right level of safety for the operations that are considered for small airborne robotic appliances, things we call drones, and let them go do their job safely, because the public benefit of those use cases is absolutely massive. Not to mention the environmental benefit of being able to do things that we do with, you know, Jet A or 100 low lead burning systems today with an electric system, right? So, so what we've done this year is kind of built on that baseline of core tech that's gotten to a point of performance which is pretty compelling, and actually looked at where's the best place to deploy this. Certainly on board, that's, you know, very easy for people to understand. We're kind of supplementing the human's perception, and our Cassia system is really a perception engine. Detect and avoid is kind of the biggest thing it does, but when you have cameras and a computer and smart software, you can do some other stuff too, that a pilot does. You know, like when I lose my navigation equipment, I look out the window and I go, oh, okay, there's the two mountains I'm going to fly between. That's my way home. A vision system can do exactly the same thing. So you start to see these derivative capabilities and value that you can deliver to help people solve the problem. And, you know, we focused a lot of energy there, and we focused a lot of energy on where else people want to use similar capability. And the product you brought up is Casio G, which stands for ground. You know, don't ever accuse us of being amazing marketers, but you know, we learned that a lot of these, especially the industrial inspection use cases, they want to be done by very small aircraft for a variety of for different reasons. One, they're smaller and cheaper. Yeah, great. Two, they're also more frangible, which means your kinetic energy on the aircraft is low enough that even if you have a mishap, you're probably not creating a ground risk for people that aren't involved in your operations. There's a lot of incentive to use smaller aircraft. The challenge with smaller aircraft is our famous, our most beloved four-letter acronym SWAP, size, weight, and power.
Right.
They're just not that big, right? So, and if you're purpose building an aircraft for an inspection mission, you build it just a little bit bigger than the camera you need to carry, or the
Right.
sensor you need to carry. So there's not a
Right.
lot of, mass fraction left over for other stuff. So when it comes to putting things like our system on board, that's a challenge. That said, they don't fly that far, and their mission is largely local. So when we think about BV loss, beyond visual line of sight, it immediately kind of implies a view of flying these long pipelines or power lines, and that's certainly a valuable use case for drones. But the one to many is potentially the more economically beneficial use case for drones. For an operator to be able to have multiple drones in the sky doing a mission,
Right.
delivery, inspection, security, mapping. Wow, like now I can cover massive amounts of area with one human, and that it gets really compelling. So to do that, you still need to have some awareness of the airspace.
Yes.
So our system deployed on the ground, which actually kind of started as kind of a wild hair idea, again, back to diversity of thought and different views on the problem. Like somebody said, well, what happens if we just put it on a tripod? And so we did that. We're gonna go out and by the airport and plug it in. And sure enough, it actually worked better because now it's in a static environment. We could like calibrate it for where it's looking, and voila, we're picking up targets all over the place.
Now these
So
two are together, right, John? So, the Casio
totally.
G and then the Casio on
Totally.
board, you can have, so this is so funny, because when I was working with Aaron Rudger from your team earlier this year, I was working on a couple articles for Iris, and he's like, all right, do something on ground-based surveillance. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Iris doesn't have ground-based surveillance. And so the clue bird went off. I knew you guys were going to come out with something at some point, but for everybody out there, if you want to check it out, it's called Unified Surveillance. I think it's on your website, John, and then it's also on my website. Kind of a thought paper on that. But I interviewed Andy Turling at New Air because he's very involved in the ASTM standards for UTM and unmanned traffic management, and then of course John Daniels from Praxis International, who was with New Air for a bit, but he's just such an expert in the field. And basically the standards that the international bodies are creating are saying, hey, there's not a one size fits all solution here. The more the merrier, and having kind of a holistic ground and air based combination is probably going to be the way to go. And so you guys were ahead of the power curve on your marketing. Gee, keep it simple, right? Cassie,
Absolutely.
you know what it is, it's on the ground. So
Right.
very
Yeah.
cool.
Right.
You're not only doing stuff on the ground, you're actually doing stuff with manned aircraft too.
Yeah.
So because look,
This.
when we think about airspace and what the future is going to be, hopefully the sky is filled with drones and VTOL aircraft. The question is how do we have those manned aircraft detecting some of these things? So tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I think you have a recent partnership on this
We
idea.
do. Yeah, we're super excited about it. A company called Becker Avionics with a very long history in general aviation avionics. And they're kind of like the guy behind the guy. They do a lot of OEM deals with other avionics manufacturers that, you're probably more familiar with. But a legacy of really high quality, well-engineered, certified systems, very complementary to what we do. We're a computer vision and AI startup. They're a avionics equipment manufacturer. So when we started talking to Mr. Becker himself, he got really excited about the prospect of using computer vision on board helicopters. And when you think about the mission of most helicopters, it's incredible. They can take off and land from anywhere, but that almost by definition puts them into mission sets that have a higher risk. They're flying at lower altitudes. They're spinning a wing to fly, right? Which puts you in different parts of the atmosphere in terms of where you feel comfortable and safe. And typically hovering at low altitude is not comfortable. It can be safe, but it's not comfortable for a pilot, right? They either want to be moving forward fast so they got energy that they can convert to an auto rotation, or hovering high so you got time to generate that energy on the way down. So you know, when helicopter pilots are at low altitude doing their missions, which typically are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Attention demanding missions. It's either supporting an officer on the ground or searching for someone who's lost, right? You're spending their time looking at the ground, not at the air. So anything that helps situational awareness for a helicopter pilot performing these critical missions is huge. So Mr. Becker said, hey, can I use your system to detect just anything that's near the helicopter? And then I'll use my avionics system to generate a 3D spatial audio cue for the pilot.
Oh, wow.
So going to human machine interface, right? Like, it's not another blip on a screen that
Right.
then
So
detracts attention. It's
what's the
audio.
alert? Yeah, what
It's,
does it
it's,
say?
it's basically a voice in your ear, but spatially accurate. So if there
Wow.
was traffic at 4 o'clock, you would hear a voice that said traffic. And it would, for you, you would naturally, your ear and brain would compute, oh, that's coming from my 4 o'clock, right? So
Oh my
super
God.
intuitive, right? Super easy, no real training required.
Yeah.
And you get this incredible new level of spatial awareness through their 3D audio system. So we're incredibly excited about this partnership. And you know, that goes to drone detection, other aircraft detection. Detecting birds is becoming more and more important, which, you know, we've always detected birds, and frankly for us they look like false positives because we're looking for airplanes. So
Right,
we detect them and then we discard them. And now
right.
here we've got a new category of, you know, potential customer that says, no, we care about them. Tell us where they are. So, you know, I doubt we'll ever go so far as to say, well, that's a red-tailed hawk. But you know, we'll be able to at least give, like, I'm going to make a Dune reference here, you know, bird sign, like worm sign. If you've ever watched Dune, okay, sorry, I just really geeked out for your audience there, but you know, give some sort of indication that, hey, there's bird activity this direction, and that in many cases can be enough. So pretty excited about it.
It's huge. So I could see in the future, given that a lot of, what my understanding of VTOL aircraft, some of the design of some of those are more kind of akin to, maybe a helicopter. I know as they're looking at certification standards, they're borrowing some of those standards. All the designs are different, but I could see
Mhm.
where this technology that you're talking about, this partnership could be transferable
Totally.
to advanced air mobility, urban air mobility, VTOL aircraft.
Totally. I'm not at liberty to say who we're working with, but we're already talking to a number of eVTOL manufacturers for this very reason, right? Because
Wow.
the direction there, and you know, I tip my cap to them. Use what's on the books today, right?
Yeah,
Use the
absolutely.
airspace and the systems and the certification basis. Use that stuff. Like, get your
Yeah.
airplane flying,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's great. Like, go fast, put a pilot in. Awesome. Um, but you know, ultimately, you can see the economic benefits of being able to get the pilot out of the aircraft, so that
Yeah.
now you've got that seat for a passenger, or you can, you know, reduce the size of the aircraft. Whatever the driver is, there's incentive to go that direction. Well, to do that, you're going to need better situational awareness around the aircraft itself, right? It's going to be more of a self-contained node that is aware of its immediate surroundings. And at least for the foreseeable future, you know, we're not planning to shut down airspace to people that just like to go flying in their Cub on the weekend. God bless America. That's great, right? We have freedom of the skies. It's a shared resource. So, you know, for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a lot of mixed traffic at lower altitudes, just like we see today. And frankly, there's going to be more because more of these novel use cases are starting to pop up as a result of, you know, electric propulsion, distributed propulsion, control systems, onboard compute, manufacturing and fabrication methods. Super exciting time to be in aviation, really.
It absolutely is. It's interesting you mentioned that, John, because I've got a number of regulars on Clubhouse. In fact, Lori DiMattis from your group was on there with Aaron last week. And this has come up multiple times now, especially from the law enforcement community. We've got a couple of regulars that dial in. this idea that there are certain aircraft that, drones aside, that don't squawk.
Oh yeah,
So like the
lots.
smaller, so to me it's just like, okay, why we're making, drones beam out remote ID here shortly.
Yep.
But yet you can have a manned aircraft that doesn't have to talk to other aircraft around it. You know, to me that seems a
Yeah.
little interesting.
It is. Well, I'll just use one example, crop dusters, right?
Yeah,
If anybody's ever
right.
watched a crop duster, it is freaking amazing flying. Like these pilots are super legit aviators. Maybe a little crazy, but way to go. And if you look at those aircraft, it's engine, fuselage, seat and controls, and then reservoir for the spraying system. There's nothing else on
Right.
board, right? Like there's no avionics.
Right.
Many of them don't even have lights because they don't do it at night. Some do, but not all. So if you really kind of reframe your thinking, oh, actually, this is the purest form of an airplane. It is literally something just to go up in the air and go do something and come back.
Right.
So when you think about, should they mandatory equip? Look, if everybody had ADS-B on board and our system had enough bandwidth and capacity and we could filter out different types of ADS-B targets on our ATC displays, no brainer. You have a 100% cooperative system and, then you just worry about contingencies when stuff breaks. But
Right.
the truth is, it's a lot more complicated when you start thinking about equipping aircraft like crop dusters because they might not have the electrical system. So now you got to put an electrical system in, and now you're changing the minimum equipment list of the airplane, and now you're changing the weight and balance of the airplane, and now you're potentially affecting the mission capacity of the airplane. So I think for the foreseeable future, we're probably going to have a mixed fleet in the NAS
Yeah.
of equipped, non-equipped, electrically powered, non-electrically powered, et cetera.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the hobby and just recreational use of airspace we see from the light sport community to the paraplane community to the hang gliding community to gliders.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
a
yeah,
trivial problem.
gliders is a whole nother thing, but we can slap a remote ID module on a small drone, even if they're recreationally used, otherwise they're relegated to flying in a FRIA, right? The federally
Right.
recognized identification area. Why can't you slap something similar on the crop dusting plane? I mean, does it really jack
Hey,
up weight and balance and electronics so much?
so
I,
here you
I'm
go,
just,
Don.
I'm just throwing out there, like really from, a non-technical standpoint, coming from where I sit, it just seems to make more sense if we're so concerned about accidents in the NAS and requiring all of these things for very small drones. Why are we not requiring something for larger manned aircraft? I mean, to me, it
Yeah.
just makes sense. But that all aside, let's talk. Let's switch a little bit gears a little bit to talk about. You mentioned the integration pilot program, or IPP, and some of the great work you did there. You're still part of the Beyond program,
We are.
and recently worked with your team to write a piece about the work you're doing, as you mentioned, in Nevada, in Reno, with the fire department there and Swift Water Rescue. I don't know if you
Mhm.
want to talk a little bit about some of that innovation that you're doing in that R&D space.
Yeah, it's a really exciting project. Well, anytime you get to actually go do a mission that saves a life, it's just a really rewarding and motivating thing to go do, right? Now, it's early days, but this is a real problem, not just in Reno, but
Oh
all
yeah.
along, the southwest of the US because we're so dry so much of the year. But then when we do get rain, it's like monsoonal. And the surface of the earth, then it doesn't absorb the water, it just becomes a torrent. So here in Southern California, every year when we get our first heavy rain, sure enough, somebody was down in the levee and they got washed downstream. Now fortunately in Southern California, where all those end. um, but this is a problem in Reno. And the challenge is it's so swift, it happens so quickly, and a person in the maelstrom of rushing water is almost impossible to see. So locating the victim is one of the biggest challenges that the fire department has. They want to use drones. They want to be able to deploy, when they get first report of a flash flood or first report of somebody that got caught in the water, and then get ahead of it, right? deploy downstream, be able to search using, you know, probably some thermal technology. That's one of the things we're going to experiment with FLIR as a partner, to detect the person in the water. And now if they can do that, now Chief can much more efficiently deploy crews to effective rescue. Whereas, you know, without being able to do that, they're always kind of a little bit behind the water, right?
Yeah,
Like they
no, they
get there and
absolutely.
then their victim cruises past. You're like, oh God, now you got to deploy another team. So this is, I think this is going to be, you know, game changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we hear about this golden hour on the battlefield that if you're able to swoop in, grab a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, maybe guardian if Space Force is out there now, you know, off the battlefield, within that first hour of injury, their likelihood of success, you know, of successful recovery from that injury is greater. In the water, that's it's you're not talking about an hour anymore because oftentimes it'll be freezing. You know, the person's
Yep.
going to panic, as you said, this water is
Yep.
rushing. And I
Yep.
and I believe it was Chief Dave Cochran, he mentioned the assets that they have to deploy just along the bank by foot, and the vehicles, at least 7 vehicles to go looking for somebody. You're right, this can give them such a head start, and it's such an
Yep.
amazing use case. So really interesting to learn about that, and really from the perspective of the person in the water, if they're able to see the drone, and even if you're able to then say Cochran's team's able to use an audio, right,
Hmm.
function and talk to the person calmly, like, we are here, we see
Yep.
you, you know, put your
Yep.
feet up or what, you know, like those first instructions, you know, put your feet forward, lay on your back, whatever it is, we're going to be right there, you know. My understanding also, when people are in the water, and you know, the potential for drowning really increases when they panic, because they don't think anyone's going to come for them. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
just, I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about
Yeah.
just the incredible impacts that this technology is going to have in saving lives. And it's so
Totally.
great that you guys are doing that. I know
Totally.
you're doing a lot globally, so let's shift to Canada.
Yeah.
You know, so you have the what you call the Pathfinder program up there in Canada. And in fact, you've recently partnered with Volatus Aerospace, a kind of a big player up there on our
Yep.
northern border. Why
Yep.
don't you tell us a little bit about your Canadian Pathfinder program and
Yeah.
what you're doing with Volatus?
I mean, you know this well from being a military aviator, right? Like, it starts with the foundations of knowledge and training. And when you start to think about widespread, you know, BV loss adoption, well, you got to have a foundational layer of people that understand, you know, the safe way to do this. So the original, you know, kind of Pathfinder in Canada was partnering with the test ranges
Yeah,
to say, hey, here's a system that'll help protect the airspace. That lets you get people out there in the range learning how to execute these missions, like developing their con ops and their safety procedures and things like that. So it's almost decidedly non-technical, but
right.
it's enabled by certain technologies. So that has now grown into some deeper relationships with some of the other operators in Canada, and Volatus is a good example, right? Training people how to safely prepare their BV loss operations to do their actual tactical steps of flying aircraft, from checklists to maintenance procedures to BV loss ConOps. You know, these are the foundational building blocks for, you know, what you and I know will be an industry that's going to be absolutely huge,
Right.
and have tremendous benefit. And so, you know, partnerships like that are great because we're all about safety first. None of this stuff happens unless you can do it safely. And it's amazing how much safety you can put into a system just through the human element, right? Forget all the tech, forget all of the stuff, like just the mindset of the human. And this is what SMS is all about, right? Safety
Oh,
management
yeah.
systems. They're not checklists, they're not binder books, they're culture. And it's a culture around people knowing the right way to do things and being committed to that. So, you know, Volatus as a partner in that, in the BV loss space is absolutely fantastic for us.
Yeah, so when I interviewed Glenn back in May, actually, he was talking about how Canada was going to be issuing their first kind of low risk BV loss operations regulation by the end of this year. I haven't circled back to see if they've actually published that, but in the United States, of course, we know the FAA has established the beyond, you know, the BV loss ARC, right? The advisory rulemaking committee. Is that what it's called? What's the
Aviation Rulemaking Committee.
Aviation Rule. It's an advisory body, but yeah, it's the Aviation Rulemaking Committee. And
Yep.
you were on that, right? Iris is a part of this. That's
Yep.
really exciting. Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, we have a bit of a gag order. We can't really talk about
Sure
detailed discussions. But what I can share is that it has been an amazing experience. I really give the FAA kudos for inviting the people they invited. Back to the diversity topic, they deliberately invited a very diverse group. It's not just drone people, right? AOPA is in there, Helicopter Association is in there, ALPA is in there, right? So we're having discussions, really meaty debates in a very collaborative and collegial environment. So, you know, it's a large group. It's something like 93 members. There were two phases, phase one and phase two. Phase one was about laying out the problem and identifying the risks. Phase two is about drilling into those and coming up with proposed approaches that we then recommend to the FAA, coupled with the rationale for those recommended approaches. So in the phase two, we're broken down into 5 subgroups that touch things from certification of aircraft, training of aviators, to automated flight rules, and you know what's different versus AF or VFR and IFR that we have in the current rule sets, and then coming up with recommendations as to how we can safely integrate drones very quickly, which is another thing that I think is really encouraging. You know, the rulemaking process takes time, but from my perspective, you know, having been in aviation for 30 years now, but specifically in the drone business going on 10 years now, this is a level of activity and energy and resource commitment that I haven't really seen from the FAA before. So it's exciting, right? We're seeing them lean in. They're part of the discussions. I'm very encouraged that we're finally kind of like through this trough of disillusionment in terms of the drone business, and seeing this kind of, you know, steady incremental progress towards what should be, you know, a very, you know, durable and safe integration of drones into the airspace.
No, I think that's great. I love your term, trough of disillusionment. You know, look.
Not mine. I borrowed it from Gartner.
Okay,
yeah.
well, I love it anyway. You know, I'll get a little bit on a soapbox here. Fun fact, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or the FACA, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, John, but normally when federal agencies speak with industry or external groups, they you know, have to publish that in the Federal Register, or have that, you know, hearing or meeting available to the public in some manner. There's exceptions, you know, classified, etc. You know, the FAA is not subject to the FACA when it comes to these committees. And you know, all I will say from, you know, where you sit determines where you stand, of course, right? I don't know that these discussions that you're having would be less frank, more chilled, if people could actually dialed in and if it was a little more transparent.
Yeah, who knows?
You know, you don't know, but, and you know, so it would be great to have a little bit more information, I think, even as it's occurring. Not required, but you know what? Transparency is one of those things where sometimes you just do it to win over hearts and minds, if you will.
I totally agree.
You know, so I would hope if the FAA is ever listening to this podcast that they might consider like just opening up the aperture a little bit more transparency on some of these things, whether it's even beyond, you know, beyond research, to the extent that it's not proprietary. You know, I think there are so many good news stories that are just not being told. So much great work, like what you're doing, John, with this team there, that people can see, like, okay, these are people working really hard to make this right. And I think that would actually win a lot of people over.
I think it's a great point, Don. And, you know, that is something I can share, right? Like, people are working their butts off.
Yeah.
And in a much deeper way than I thought would happen, right? This is the first time I've been on an ARC. And, you know, I've been on other kind of committee things. You know, I came out of Boeing, so I was certainly involved with regulators around the world on different committees. And I always had this kind of like, follow the protocol, and okay, are we really going to talk about anything meaty today? And if we are, everybody's so careful and controlled to not make anybody mad that you don't actually make any progress. And that has been very different in this set of discussions and work groups. I mean, people are working weekends and finding ways to get together virtually or physically. You know, I personally, through, you know, the commercial UAV event, went to NBAA as well. There's sidebar, you know, meetings and discussions and workshops happening that aren't official, that are just, you know, organic from people that are involved in the ARC that are really committed to trying to find the path forward. And you know, I'll say this, you know, I run a company in kind of the startup drone business. So I'm obviously highly motivated to see the drone business start to flourish, because then
Right.
my company will flourish. But I'm also an aviator. You know, I'm a commercial pilot and a flight instructor. So I kind of have a foot in each camp. And I just want to give some credit out to the piloted community, you know, specifically AOPA, HAI, ALPA. They have been incredibly involved and hardworking to try to make this happen. And
Yeah.
that is night and day from my experience prior to Iris. You know, back in the 2013, 2014 days when I was working with regulators, you know, company I ran called 2D3, but then in situ, and then Boeing, you know, those meetings in those days, the airline world was like, nope, they should not be allowed in the airspace, right? Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
big aircraft manufacturers were like, that's nonsense, stay in your hobby area. And to
Right.
see today that those very same bodies of people are working weekends to work through diagrams and charts and suggest language, that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
And I think it shows that we're now getting to a point of maturity in our industry and our technology where this stuff is real, right?
Yeah.
People are applying rigor and safety, and it's not just frivolous, like go fly because you can. There's
Right.
real driver here. There's real benefit, and people are responsibly approaching that
Yep.
to get to a solution. So, you know, that's what I'll say. You know, your points and transparency are well taken. I can't speak for the FAA. I
No,
don't
of
know
course
what their
not.
plan
But
is to share information,
to,
but you know, it
to
has
your
been good.
point, John, those early conversations in 2013, I mean, that was pre Part 107, right? So
Yeah,
they
totally.
didn't really, you know, I mean, you had what, section 333 approvals
333.
and
Yep,
whatnot.
you got it.
Um, you know, but you're right. We absolutely come such a long way. And oh, by the way, Scott Stofman is out there saying hello to both of us. He's with AUVSI, Texas Lone Star, and with the Drone Service Providers Alliance, part of the Drone Advisory Committee, which, you know, they do hold their meetings open to the public. So,
Yep,
you know,
yep.
so for whatever that's worth. But so what can we expect next from Iris? So you, like I said, you so much going on this year
Yeah,
between, you know, the partnership you had with Becker, I think is Ray Becker,
yep,
and then Cassia G,
yep.
and you know, everything else. What's next on the horizon?
Yeah. So one of the things, and I give, you know, Lori DeMatteis, who you had on Clubhouse last week, tremendous credit for this. Since I came aboard, she's been just a tremendous partner and leader in our business. And what we have done is we've stopped kind of chasing everybody who wants to have a drone company, right? And we've really started focusing our energies on the brand names that you would expect, but specifically the ones that are making significant investments and commitments to the deployment of drones and the deployment being done safely. So, you know, watch for some announcements in the next few months of some other relationships and partnerships that we're building, but it's a focus more on, you know, the foundational players that are going to be in this market and the scale they represent,
Yep.
towards getting drones deployed for enterprise use, for emergency use, for public benefit use, et cetera. So fewer partners, fewer people, but higher quality and frankly, better visibility into the future as to what their plans are and where we're going.
Yep.
There'll be names that you recognize. And that to me is really encouraging because we're small. You know, I can't really afford to go chase 1,000, you know, prospects every month, right? We really need to focus our energies on where the biggest impact is going to come from, and this is letting us do that. So it's exciting times for us. We're getting to deploy technology into real use cases. We've got great partnerships with our partners and customers where we have a data exchange, which, you know, is this virtuous cycle that lets us improve the capability of our system every time they go flying, right? So that is a really nice way to, and that's the beauty of AI and machine learning methods, is they get better the more data you feed them. So these sets of core customers and the missions that they're flying and the locations they're flying are giving us that diversity of input, which is, you know, really accelerating the quality of the system itself.
So 2023 is going to 2022. Oh my gosh, I'm skipping ahead here.
I know. I do that
2022 is,
too.
I know, it's like 2020 was the lost year, right? 2021
Yeah,
has
we all
been
lost a year.
interesting. It's been kind of like half COVID, half not in a way.
Yeah.
I think 2022 is going to be a really big year. I know we're going to kick it off together at CES
Indeed.
with Women in Drones 2022 Las Vegas. Do
Right.
you anticipate expanding beyond Canada more globally next year?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we already are. You know, we've got customers in South Africa, Brazil, other parts of kind of like the oil region, kind of like Middle East kind of area. So Australia, New Zealand. So yes, you know, wherever people want to go fly drones safely, we want to be involved. And you said it earlier in the show. There is no single system that solves these problems, right? Everybody has a piece of the puzzle and the value that they add. So we just want to be a piece of that puzzle. And we think we represent a rational solution to a real problem, but at the right kind of price and package point, right? Like, you don't have to do it all. Like, I'm not trying to give you a God's eye view of every aircraft that's ever anywhere within 10 miles of you. I'm really just trying to give you awareness of one that might be a collision threat. And, you know, that in conjunction with other systems and ConOps and procedures and airspace, that's how you build a safe aviation system. It's never one thing. So globally, anywhere we can be a part of that equation, we're excited about.
That's awesome. And we just got a couple minutes left. So any closing comments?
No, like I said, it's super exciting time to be in aviation. And, you know, my kids are going to be the beneficiaries of a lot of the work that's going on right now. You know, I look forward to the day that they come visit me in the old folks' home in their eVTOL and step out, and I'll be like,
landing on the roof.
On that. Yeah, right, exactly. But it's a great time. I invite everybody, just, you know, participate. You know, share with your friends, your extended networks, the benefits of where we're going with aviation today, because they're huge. I mean, we're literally looking at transforming how people move and how packages move and how emergencies get handled over the next couple decades through the implementation of this kind of technology. So, you know, participate in surveys if you're asked. You know, really start thinking about noise. You know, I think people tend to look at drones and eVTOLs and go, oh, well, it's about the noise, because they think of helicopters and they think of private planes, right? But, well, let's think about that delivery truck that comes through your cul-de-sac 5 times a day. Or how about the leaf blowers that are out there at every house a different day of the week for an hour at a time,
When
right?
I'm trying to sleep,
Right. I mean, really, like, open your awareness to what you already are tolerant about, and then ask yourself, well, what's the public benefit of that? And then contrast that to what we're trying to do with this new mode of aviation. And I think it'll be eye-opening for you. You'll realize, wow, actually, this is huge benefit. And you know, that's part of what the public needs to get into with this. Not just excitement about, like, you know, an eVTOL, which is exciting, but understand the broad impacts that this transformation of aviation is going to have, and it's going to be significant.
Absolutely. And kind of to come full circle, like from where we started in the beginning, you mentioned your daughter and her involvement in STEM, even in 2nd grade, and coming in 3rd in the catapult contest. You know, and the FAA and this idea of surveys and inclusivity and participating. Next Wednesday, everybody, you know, it's going to be kind of sandwiched around this podcast, but the FAA is holding an inclusivity workshop about some of the language. You know, what terminology should we be using in this industry? And you know, I do applaud that. You know, just to even have the conversation doesn't mean the words are going to change, but just to be open to hearing, as you
Absolutely.
said, different perspectives and taking that on board and then making an informed decision. like you can't ask more from, you know, our government representatives than that. So kudos. And so I believe that begins at let's say 10, I think 10 o'clock or 10:30 Eastern. So check it out on the FAA website. Join into that conversation. If regardless of which side you're on about it, you should have your voice heard. And anyway, this is all about innovation. And so thank you so much, John, for spending this time with us, for sponsoring this entire month. And it's going to be a great month. I mean, obviously kicking it off with you tomorrow on our Clubhouse, and then next week on our podcast. Same two individuals. We're going to have Benny Farkas and Scott Jonas from Elsight. They're actually located in Israel, and so it's going to be so fun to talk to them about their system that contributes to beyond visual line of sight. Later in the month, we have Dr. Jack Elston from Black Swift Technologies. He's doing all kinds of BVLOS stuff in volcanoes, tornadoes, and hurricanes with NOAA.
Awesome.
And so, oh my gosh, wait till you hear this guy. He's amazing. And he's from Boulder, Colorado. So yay, Colorado. And then we have ATA coming on to talk about their system at the state and municipal level, gathering up that ground data to put into a system to have better visibility. So when you think of all the folks that are going to be on this month, they all play into this idea of safety, of airspace awareness, and innovation. So thanks again, John, and everybody join us next week, same time, same place with Elsight, and have a great week out here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Don. Really appreciate being here.